What we're really going to look at today is how we can replicate through our activities to a certain extent the language that is more representative of what a native child would hear as they're learning the language. You know, we can't replicate it 100% because we're in a classroom and that has its own limitations. But if we take aspects of children's experiences and their behaviours, their aptitudes, we can bring these things into a language classroom and really notch up the level of language that we are exposing our English learners to from, you know, the very beginning, and not underestimate their ability to be able to learn from this language. Okay. It's my niece and nephew. You'll see a lot of those through this talk. 10 seconds, finish that sentence with your partner. Curious. 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay, I'm really glad about some of the words that I'm hearing here because I asked this question to a number of teachers here. Monsters. Wild, little Tikes, crazy. In fairness to those teachers, these are teachers who are not used to being in an early years classroom. So, you know, there is an element of fear, I think, if you've never taught children of that age group before. It's like, oh, what do I do with them? So I redefined that question, and young children in a classroom. What are young children in a classroom environment? And we had curious, and I heard people saying that here. You know, you think about questions that children ask all the time, not just in the classroom. What's that? What's that? Why? You have to go to bed. Why? Because you need to sleep. Why? Because if you don't sleep, you won't feel well. Why? I mean, these questions, they constantly want to know and are constantly working out what is going on with the world. They are full of imagination. They will construct whole worlds around, you know, if you're just playing independently, they will pretend certain things are other things. So a block may become a telephone. This is all coming from their imagination. They are communicative. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they talk a lot, because some children do talk a lot and other children don't. As Gail said earlier, every child is individual, but every child communicates in one way or another. They are egocentric. Now, I don't mean this in a negative way. If we say that about an adult, then we usually mean it in a negative way. But children actually haven't learnt something called theory of mind, which is where they learn to put themselves in someone else's shoes. Basically, they learn this at around the age of 5. They start to be able to do this. So egocentric, they love talking about themselves, showing off, showing their things to other people. It's about me, simply because they haven't got to the level of being able to understand something from someone else's point of view. A bundle of energy. Most of the time, because when they flake out, I mean, they flake out, they just stop, you know. But yeah, I mean, you know, movement, hugely important for children. They're enthusiastic, participative, they want to participate. Fidgety. Yeah, I mean, is it easy to make a 3 or 4-year-old child sit still? Not for more than 3 minutes. And that's if you're lucky, actually. So, okay. The role of play. Tina Bruce, are people familiar with who Tina Bruce is? She's a leading writer in the field of early childhood development, and she describes play as a birth to death process. Play is for life, and this is a picture of my mother and father, actually, and much to the embarrassment of their children. They like to get dressed up as Victorians and go off for a week in Wales and pretend to be Victorians. So I thought this was quite a good demonstration of play being for life, and they're probably going to kill me for using that photo today, but anyway. For children, though, play provides a context for their physical, intellectual, social, linguistic, and emotional learning and development. And I'd like to differentiate between games and play, because with games, they are externally led, either by the teacher or by the rules of the game that they might be playing, if it's a board game or something like that. It's externally led. Play, we're talking about what children do themselves, which is led by them. They choose what they're doing, so free play, essentially. So when we're looking at these adjectives, curious, imitators, imaginative, children use play to explore and experiment, to reaffirm new concepts and ideas. They use it to act out scenes from their lives. They role play situations with others. I mean, think about tea parties and pretending to make food. And my niece was trying to feed me sand over the summer because it was a cake, this type of thing. They use it to express their imaginations, and they use it to have fun. And I think this is something that we kind of forget. If you think about rough and tumble play, it's not really about anything other than just having a good time. So how can we take these concepts and use them in a classroom? Can I just ask how many people here work in a mainstream educational setting where it's, say, a bilingual classroom? Okay. So you're teaching little children, but you're teaching them everything through English. Okay, and how many people work in a more kind of extracurricular or language learning classroom, like teaching English as a foreign language, that type of context? Okay, so we've got a mixture, which is fine. There are different issues surrounding the teaching of English or the using of English to teach in the mainstream and the language learning classroom. And the mainstream free play, children will have times of the day where they have free play. They're going to resort to using their L1 because that is their natural way of communicating. And in a language learning classroom, we can't just say, oh, well, go off and play on your own for a little bit, because really that's not what they're in the classroom for. And if it's somewhere like the British Council where parents are paying money, I mean, I don't think they'd be very happy if we're like, oh yeah, they just played for a while in the corner. Okay, so what we're going to look at, and this is where I'm going to need some volunteers, are some routines which can be used in both settings to try to incorporate the idea of play in a more free way than perhaps we're used to in a language learning classroom, but using the types of activities that children want and making it student-led so that they are autonomous in their decision as to where that play is going. In order to do this, teachers, you have to lose all your inhibitions, and you have to be one of them in order for it not to be coming from you, although you are going to be guiding that and facilitating it. So we're going to try out the what is it one, and for this I need a volunteer. Okay, good. And if I don't get volunteers, I will be asking people to stand up. Oh, where's my register? Okay. Right, we're going to pretend to take the register. So if you'd like to just sit down here. All right, taking a register. I'm going to write some names on here. This is a pretend register. What's your name?
Kim.
Kim. Juan and John. Okay, we just pretend we've got a little register here. Now, what I will always do is try to use every single opportunity in a classroom to get the students themselves doing the activity and giving them the language to be able to do it. So this would be, have done this a few times, and I will point to the name. They obviously can't read it. Whisper it in the ear. So I'll be like, Juan, is Juan here? You said.
Is Juan here?
And all the others will learn to say, if they're not here, he's not here. But if they're here, the person, I'm here. Okay, so we're going to continue. John.
Is John here?
I'm here. Yeah, they're here.
Is Gonzalo here?
I'm here. Gonzalo's here.
Is Kim here?
Anybody? Has anyone seen Kim?
There she is.
Where?
There.
Where? What, there? What, under the chair?
Right there.
Under the chair?
No.
Well,
there.
where?
There.
Well, I can't see her.
On the chair.
But that's not Kim.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not Kim. That's not Kim. What are you? You're not Kim. You're not Kim. What? Are you a cat?
No.
Could you ask her some questions? Let's see if we can find out what she is today.
Are you a butterfly?
Yeah?
Are you a dog? No, I'm not. Are you a princess?
I'm going to stop you because we could go on forever. What are you?
I'm a monster.
Aha, they do that one a lot. We have always monsters, dragons, princesses. The point of this is that it is coming from them, and one student will do this every week. That was a very small kind of sample because that can be really extended. Through that, they've learned prepositions, on, under. I mean, I take it further. Are they in the bin? Let's ask in the bin, where are you? And you can build in so much language. And then once they have learnt the questions, they are asking, so initially the teacher is going to have to say those questions because the students won't know the language to do it, but you can build in a whole range of questions. And so the end of last year, my class of 4-year-old children were using language like, where do you live? Can you fly? What do you eat? All this level of language that actually was really quite extraordinary for children of that age. And that's just by using a register and kind of being a little bit playful. And then we had dragons and they started eating each other, so that wasn't very good actually, but we had to calm it down. Thank you very much. In the same way, these other things here kind of tap into the idea of play. We're not going to demonstrate these ones because we do have other ones to demonstrate later. So a journey, I mean, children and transport, they love transport. So we have a routine board, and at the beginning of every lesson, after the register, we go on a little journey, and it totally comes from them. I will ask them where they want to go, and I will have flashcards. So, at the beginning, there may only be 2 places. Would you want to go to the sea or to the mountains? And then you add to those over the course. And I mean, we went to space, we've been to the moon, and then you add the transport into that. So how are we going to get there? We're going to get there by bike, by spaceship, spaceship rocket, same thing. By train, by dragon, magic carpet. And then as you're on this journey, so you act it out with them, talking through it, thinking out loud, so you're just constantly giving them language, you will then, you're on the train, what can you see out of the window? butterflies, always. There were even butterflies in space last year, so space butterflies. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? And you're constantly feeding in that language. And it's, working with children learn through their senses at this age. So you are working with those and getting them to imagine, and it's totally led by them. And if you're clever with it, you can kind of lead it so that it ends up being a way of presenting what's coming next in the class. So language items, we had one with the rooms of the house, and they were going to be learning that because it came up in the book that they were using, a storybook that we were going to do called Peace at Last. And so we went on our journey, and we were in space, on the moon, I think, and I was like, oh, what's that? Look, it's a house. Let's go and have a look. And so we all trudged off, and we go to the house, and we open the door, and we go through the rooms of the house. So they have heard these before we even get to them learning them. So you can do lots with this type of things. And then I think the magic box is, I think we do this a lot. It's very adaptable. You can use it in lots of different ways. But just having some objects in a box that they can take out, and you don't let them look and they have to take something out. You ask them to guess beforehand what could be in the box, and perhaps there are some things from previous lessons in there, so you're revising vocabulary. And you can even take it a level further and get them to imagine things. So they all have to imagine an object, and they have an object, and then they put it in the box, and then someone else has to imagine taking it out and say what this object is. So there's lots of different things you can do with these types of things. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now that's me nicking the trampoline from my niece and nephew. A bundle of energy. I mean, I think you're all aware, if you're used to working with children of this age, that you do need a lot of energy as a teacher in the classroom. And, it comes down to movement. Children at this age, they are still learning how to move. So they're using movement to learn about and experiment with their bodies. They are using it to learn about and explore their environment, to communicate and express themselves, or my niece, when she was, one, that was, I'm hungry. That's what her way of saying that, she wanted something to eat. Well, actually, it usually happened when my sister was preparing the food, and she was going, getting really frantic about it. So, using movement in a classroom is very important, but it needs to be more than just your this is a kinesthetic activity, because I know that we should have movement in the classroom. When you're using movement, we need to be looking at ways that we can actually support the physical development of the child in various areas. So we're going to take here yoga positions. Now, when I say yoga positions, they're kind of pretend yoga positions. And for this, I am going to need 5 volunteers. And if you don't put your hands up, I will just come and get you. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Need 1 more. Up on the stage and facing there. Okay. Now, today, children, we are going to be reading a story. I'm missing one. One more person.
Run away.
Very good. We're going to be reading a story. What do you think the story is about?
A giraffe.
It is about a giraffe. And do you think we might see any other animals in here?
A monkey.
Maybe. Not on the cover. What about in the book? What other animals? Maybe lions? Tigers? Snakes? Okay. Well, we'll find out in a minute. First, we are going to learn some movements for different animals. Right. Warthog. Okay, I want you to stand on your tiptoes. Undo this. All right.
I'm not dressed correctly for this.
Okay, that's an excellent warthog, wouldn't you agree? That's a good warthog. Okay, thank you very much. You can stand up. And next we're going to have rhinos. Okay. You are going to stand on one leg. Very good. Perfect. Lions. So we were right about the lions. A big movement like this. Very good. And really try and jump up. That's excellent. And a chimp. The chimp is like this. Very good. And the final one is a baboon. Baboon. Now this is a flat back, bottom in the air. Right, now, you might have to work, when you're teaching them these movements, you're going to have to work with them a few times and practice them, teach them the vocab, and then you read them a story. So we're now going to read, we're not going to read the whole thing because it would take too long. We're now going to read the story, and I would like you to do the movement when you hear your animal. Okay, and if anyone wants to join in, they're more than welcome to. All right, so, and this year, when the day arrived, poor Gerald felt so sad because when it came to dancing, he was really very bad. The warthogs started waltzing. The rhinos rocked and rolled. The lions danced a tango that was something, got a thing over it, which was elegant and bold. The chimps all did the cha-cha-cha with a very Latin feel, and 8 baboons all teamed up for a splendid Scottish reel. Okay, very good. So you get the idea. And what you're doing there, because you're working with things like balance, balance is something very difficult for a 3 or 4-year-old child. Standing on one leg, big movements. You're helping not only in the learning of English, because through reading a story, you're working with them being able to pick out words within the story and understand the words, even if they don't understand all of the rest of it. But you're also working with their physical development. So you're pushing them to a development level, helping support a development level in the physical development. And there are lots of other activities, and we're going to look at some of them, that you can do this with as well. Thank you very much, animals. Okay, jumping jacks. Jumping jacks, we're going to practice it later as well, but this is just a question of having flashcards on the floor that you get them to jump to, and if you get them to do it standing over it, holding hands, they have to actually kind of work together a little bit at the same time as well. So you have a series of cards on the floor, and you will say one of these cards, and they will have to jump to the card. Finders keepers, putting things around the room for them to have to find and stand up and look for. You can do that with flashcards, you can do that with objects, with lots and lots of different things. Yoga positions and aim and fire. Well, rather than having, are you all familiar with kind of flashcard races? So you'd have a group of flashcards and you get them, you call out a word and they have to come and pick the word up. Well, children can walk, run relatively competently by the time they get to 3. Maybe 2-year-olds are still a bit shaky on their feet, but a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, they can run relatively competently. What they can't do is aim. They've still got the hand-eye coordination is not that developed yet. And so instead of just running to the flashcards, use a soft sponge ball, no cricket balls, a soft sponge ball, and you put them on the wall, and they throw, you call out the word or words, as we're going to talk about in a minute, and they throw it at the picture. And it will take them quite, they'll have to stand quite close initially. You move them back a little bit every time you do the activity to help them develop that particular area. How are we doing for time, please? All right. This is another one of my nieces. Wriggle, wriggle. This is going to the children being fidgety. Well, the thing is that they are. And you're never going to make them sit still, so stop trying to make them sit still. I mean, there are techniques that you can use to make sure you keep their attention, but you're not, if you sit there and you're like, shh, sit still, don't move, it just doesn't work. So you need to look for other ways to get those children doing what you want them to be doing. And it comes down a little bit to what Gail has just been talking about, although on a much more basic level. I think in no age group is the idea of learning to learn more relevant, because they are learning to learn in the sense of, they are blank books. They've not been around for that long, so they are learning, everything is new. But also, they are not used to being in a classroom. They are learning to be in a classroom, and they need to know what our expectations are of them. So, you need to scaffold meaning through miming. So if you want children to put their hands up instead of calling out, you need to make sure they know, and your hands up. Everything that you do needs to have some form of scaffolding around it, because if it doesn't, you're not going to be able to help them with the meaning and to attach the meaning to what they're hearing. You need to use positive reinforcement, and I don't mean good. Good is not positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement means things like pointing out, look at Kim here, isn't she sitting beautifully? Well done, and she's taking notes and everything. And then you look pointedly at the rest, he maybe not, although there are lots of very good people taking notes. That will make the others think, well, I want that, I want to be. So using it like that, and also positive reinforcement in the sense of actually really communicating. Actually, if a child tells you something and you respond to it, then you are reinforcing their effort to communicate with you, even if it's in the L1, and we'll talk about that in a sec. Actively teaching routines. So, you're moving from the table to the floor, and my way of doing that is usually to count down, and the first few times we might do that in a classroom, I'll be stand up, come forward, and make a circle. And when they're sitting on the floor, I look down and I say, that is a potato, that's not a circle. Let's try it again. And they go back, and we've had potatoes and cucumbers and pineapples and lots of vegetables, which now they know, because when I look down and I go, they'll go, cucumber? And I'll be, yeah, back you go. And so you're making them repeat the routines. Routines are not something that they just know. You have to teach them. And actually that is true all the way through the learning process, right up until, in your senior classes. They need to know the routine behind a particular task in order to be able to complete that task. Transitional techniques, getting techniques, lots of different ways to kind of stop an activity, start an activity, from counting down to something I use a lot, putting your hands on your head. So I put my hands on my head and then they have to copy. Sometimes that's silent. I just stand there until they've all seen it. Other times I will say, hands on your heads. And with that, you can continue it with shoulders, nose, and even take it further than that with things like elbow on your head. And it's impossible. So you give them the language to say, it's impossible. I can't do it. I have a class of 5-year-olds who say things like, that's impossible. That's easy peasy lemon squeezy. You know, all these pieces of language that are coming simply from a routine. And, you know, I think we all probably know this. Anything longer than 5 minutes is not, unless it's kind of something to do with craft activities at a table, they're not going to concentrate for a prolonged period of time. And I think that the rule is something like 3 minutes per year of age or something like that. So if you've got a class of 4-year-olds, the maximum amount of time will be somewhere around 12 minutes concentrating on one thing if they are enjoying it. So if they're not enjoying it, so something that they've chosen to do individually, like playing with a toy or something, they'll keep it for 12 minutes and then they'll put it down and move on to something else. So you have to make that even, reduce that time in a classroom environment because you are telling them what you want them to do, not them choosing. Right, so here are a few little techniques that you can use. Let's try this one, actually. All right, so flashcards again. You ready? Are you sure? Oops, very slippery flashcards. You see, you weren't watching. Did you see it? Who saw it? Hands up, hands up, hands up. Over here. Aha. All right, you have to watch carefully if you're going to get the next one. Are you ready? Ready? What is that? Legs, very good. And so on. So you find ways, move around the classroom when you are teaching vocabulary through flashcards. Hide them, show them quickly, put them, stand with your back to them and hold them over your head, or anything that you can get them following you with their eyes and making them focus on you. Lights, camera, action. Another little technique, actually, this is a technique I saw when I was observing a teacher, and it was brilliant. She gets them to pretend to have a video camera. And so she'll be doing something, or another student will be doing something that she wants the others to pay attention to, because that can be the most difficult. If we think back to them being egocentric, it's very hard for them to concentrate on another child because they want to be the ones getting up and doing it. So you get them to pretend to have a video camera, and you say, lights, camera, action, right, everybody, let's film. And then they film whatever it is you're wanting them to concentrate on. You can do that with cameras as well, and pretend, a pretend camera. Chance and rhythm, I think we're all familiar with these in an early years classroom, but little ones like 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And then they learn to say 1, 2, eyes on you. So it's an interactive, they have to listen to you and then they have to say it back. And you can do that as well with rhythms like, very good. So they're just little kind of techniques for kind of getting the attention back to you. Teacher blunders. Well, children love telling adults that they're wrong. And it's just kind of playing with that a little bit. So if you're reading them a story, I'll be like, right, and today we're going to read a book about a lion. And what? No, it's not a lion. That's a giraffe. If it's a book they're familiar with, they've read it maybe a few times in the class already, you can deliberately miss out a page and go on to the next page. And they'll be like, no, 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 no. Lots of little things like that, showing flashcards, you know, and you show it to them and say, 2 apples. Or no, you say 2 pears, and they're like, no, it's 2 apples, or whatever it might be. So deliberately saying things are wrong so that they correct you and just playing it stupid a little bit. Okay, moving on. Right, language. I mean, this really is what it's all about for us because we are language teachers. Communicators and egocentric were words that people had told me. I also added contextualizers because they do have, as we said, this innate ability to work out meaning from the context. They've done it all their lives up to that point. They have learned a language, not quite perfectly yet, but they're certainly getting there, their native language. So they have this innate ability to be able to work out meaning from context. And what happens in a classroom often, and what happens in the materials, with the materials that we're using, is that we teach words because we're like, oh, well, they're only 3 and they're only 4, so we'll just teach them individual words because they can't really do much more than that yet, and it's not true. They have an innate desire to communicate. They want to communicate, and they will do so with whatever means they can. Language, expressions, movement, and language, obviously we're talking their L1. How many times they come into the classroom, I went to the zoo at the weekend, and they're speaking in Spanish, and, you have 2 choices as a teacher there, really, and we'll talk about what we're going to do there in just a second. They're talking about themselves, and they may have a little bit of trouble sharing, working together, respecting turn-taking. They all want to speak at the same time. They all speak over each other because there are social conventions here that they just don't know yet. They haven't learnt them. Okay, so some activities there, and I need 2 volunteers for this one. Whoa.
We're going to have to exchange emails. I know.
All right, now we spoke a little earlier about jumping jacks. I'm going to actually demonstrate that with you now. I'd like one of you to stand here and one of you opposite and hold hands. Okay. Now, at the beginning of this session, we learnt the words that are on these cards by using single words. Yeah? I'm now going to use more than one word. I want you to just jump to the correct one. Okay? Long legs. Short spiky hair. Strong arms. Big feet.
Looking at mine.
Red ears. Okay, so you get the idea. So, you've taken it one step further. Don't move, because I'm going to use it again in just a second. By just having more, you're chunking the language. They may only be able to produce arm, ear, hair themselves, but you have given them adjectives that are commonly used with those, and you've given them right from the beginning, and actually they can produce them. If you don't chunk the language, the problem you have is that you miss the kind of features of pronunciation that English, when you put words together into a sentence, has often a very different pronunciation as if you say them individually. So if you take something like blue eyes, together, blue eyes, there's a w sound in there. that you're not going to get if you teach those words in isolation. And children are perfectly capable of taking it to a chunk of that size at this age. In terms of what you input, though, it should be even more. So I've got short, spiky hair. I've got strong arms. Okay, so you can, even though you haven't taught them to say the I've got perhaps yet, you can be saying it when they are doing an activity like this rather than just saying the single word. And one more thing you can do is take it even further and actually create a little text from that. So we're going to say, I was walking down the road the other day and I saw the strangest person. The strangest person. He had big red ears, really long legs. His hair was short and spiky, but he had these huge, big, strong arms, and his feet were massive. Okay, so with that, you've given them all of this language. All you've asked them to do is hear the words that you want them to be internalizing, but you have inputted way more language just by turning a simple activity. It's a bit like the yoga one. You are giving them more than you're expecting them to produce. Okay, you may sit down again. L1 switch. I mean, what do you do when a child speaks to you in Spanish?
No, I just say it in English.
Okay, so you can say it back to them in English. You can make it part of a conversation, can't you? I mean, the worst thing that you can do to a child of this age is say, shh, English, don't speak Spanish, don't speak Spanish. And I think Gail mentioned it in her talk as well about this kind of native language being banned in the classroom. It used to be what we said, and I think we're changing a little bit in how we approach the L1. There has to be purpose to it, but if a child talks to you in Spanish because they want to communicate with you and you tell them not to, they're not going to speak either in Spanish or in English. So the best thing you can do is reformulate it in English and continue the conversation. So, you know, oh, you went to the zoo. What did you see? And did you see any lions? Did you see any tigers? And you continue the conversation with them. Obviously at appropriate times of the lesson, because otherwise you're just going to have them all asking, you know, telling you their stories as well. Making them work together, student teachers. It's hard finding tasks that have an element of pair work in them at this age because they don't have the language resource to be able to, we don't think they have the language resource to be able to actually complete a task in English. But if you give one of them the role of a teacher and the other one the role of a student, they love it. Nothing better than playing the role of a teacher. And a little lollipop stick, and they have to point at different things in the book, and the other one has to say what they are, or the other one has to ask them the question. I mean, the questions, what's that? And, you know, the typical questions we said at the beginning, what's that, why, are things that you need to teach them to say, because they can then ask each other, what's that? And the other one has to respond to it. A class mascot. My students take this home. One student a week takes it home. The parents take photos. They bring them back into class, and we have a little presentation where, again, we're inputting language. So what are you doing with Kimber? You know, they'll say, estamos comiendo. And I'll be like, oh, you're having lunch. Wow, okay. And then you get them to repeat it. And the more times the children hear, because generally they kind of take the same type of photos, they will learn this language because you're regularly repeating it. And then they put the photos in their scrapbooks, and in fact their scrapbooks are used for all of their work. This is just, it's like a, there is no Spanish equivalent for this. It's where people put things to remember, photos and so on. And we put all of their work in there, all of their worksheets. That's an example of a worksheet at the bottom there, a family tree. and their photos. We take photos of them in the classroom, and then they have little, show and tell sessions. If they've done a drawing, then they show the others in the class what they've done. They talk to their partner about what they've done. This is my caterpillar, it's green. And even if they just say caterpillar, green, they're still producing language. So there are all ways that you can get them to be listening to and producing more language than just going through a series of flashcards and playing some vocabulary games, which is what tends to happen in an early years classroom. How are we doing for time? Done. I'm not going to do that bit. And that's it. So we'll just skim through that. Thank you very much. My niece and nephew again. Thank you for coming, and that's my email address if anybody wants to email me. Be delighted to talk.